Part 3 in this series. Today we're talking about negatives with the verb to be and other verbs, with frequency adverbs, the abbreviations of negatives, yes/no questions, and information questions. In part 1 we had the introduction to present simple, in which we talked about these two important people. If you haven't watched this video, you can check it out right there. In the second video, we explored a couple of other fictitious daily routines, in this case the one of Mr. Potes and the one of Elon Musk. If you haven't watched that video, I invite you to check it out over there. So in those episodes we explore how was the structure of affirmatives in present simple, with frequency adverbs, with the verb to be. If you wanna deepen on that, you can check that out. But today we are exploring negatives in present simple, and basically the only difference is column 2 and column 3. These two columns were not in affirmatives. Basically we had subject verb complement, and the frequency adverb was optional for affirmatives. And here we have subject verb complement, which were the same for affirmatives, but now we have two extra columns between the subject and the verb. They are the auxiliary do or does and not, the word not. And when we're using the verb to be, we have one new column, which is the column of not. If we eliminate not, then it is an affirmative sentence. What happens if we want to use frequency adverbs? Here are a couple of examples if we want to use frequency adverbs with the verb to be. He is not always disrespectful. We are not usually late. Something to have in mind is that frequency adverbs are not commonly used when we are using the verb to be in present simple. So it's not very common. That's why I only show a couple of sentences here. And here are some examples of frequency adverbs. Also, Mr. Pythagoras does not always wake up early. We do not usually have breakfast in a restaurant. They do not often work at a bank. This is weird, and I have to admit it. I mean, frequency adverbs, they are not usually used with negative statements. Never use never in negatives, because that would be a redundancy. Example, he doesn't never attend meetings. This sounds weird. It sounds terrible. So please avoid using never when you use the auxiliary do plus not. The correct way to express this message is he never attends meetings. And as you can notice, there is no auxiliary and there is no negative word. The negative word not is not here because never is already a negative. So just to have in mind. What is the abbreviation of negatives? For the verb to be, it's very simple. If it is not, then you say isn't, and this is the spelling. If it is am not, the verb to be am plus not cannot be abbreviated. What can be abbreviated is the verb to be with the subject, which is abbreviated here, am not. But this with this, forget about it. If it is are plus not, this is the abbreviation, aren't. And the pronunciations are isn't, the verb to be am plus not, am not, because it cannot be abbreviated. Alright, and when you abbreviate the verb to be am with I, it sounds am, and aren't. So these were the examples of abbreviation of negatives with the verb to be. Now, when we have a different verb that is not the verb to be, what we abbreviate is the auxiliary do or does plus not. If it is does not, the abbreviation is doesn't. If it is do not, the abbreviation is done, right? Doesn't, done. We don't have breakfast in a restaurant. Something to point out, when we were studying affirmative sentences in the previous video, when we had the third singular person, she, he, or it, remember that we used to add s or es to the verb, or ies, depending on a set of rules that you can check in that video. I'll leave it in the description. But here, as you can notice, there is no s here, despite us using she. Alright, and the same happens here. Mr. Pythagoras doesn't wake up early. So, if it was an affirmative, it would say wakes up. So here, that s, or that es, or that ies, disappears. If you remember what I mentioned when I was explaining that rule, I said it only applied for affirmatives. And the reason why it does only apply to affirmatives is because here the auxiliary does already has the es, as you can notice here. And remember that does is only used with third singular person, like Mr. Pythagoras, who is he. That's why we have here doesn't, and here we eliminate the s that was present in an affirmative sentence. And the same happens here. She doesn't travel. We cannot say she doesn't travels. If it was an affirmative sentence, we would say she travels every day. So here is something to highlight. The rule for adding es or s or ies only applies to affirmative. Forget about it in negatives, in questions. Just don't think about it. So, structure of questions. This is very simple. In affirmative statements, we only had subject, verb, complement, remember? Here we have two extra columns. One at the beginning, auxiliary, and what at the end, question mark. So these two columns to the extremes, they represent the question marks we use in Spanish, for example. In Spanish, we use a question mark here at the beginning and at the end. In English, we don't use it at the beginning because we know exactly where the question starts. The auxiliary goes before the subject. When we have this order, we know immediately that we're talking about a question. Do we, does she, do you, does he, do they, do we. That's the reason why in English we don't use a question mark at the beginning. These questions are yes, no questions because all the answers to these questions could be either a yes or a no. Do we check our emails every day? Yes, we do. No, we don't. Does she check her email every day? Yes, she does. No, she doesn't. Do you study at Universidad del Valle? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Or it could be in plural, but remember that you could be singular, you, or plural, you, if there are many people. So, do you study at Universidad del Valle? If it is plural, the answer is yes, we do. We. Does he train every day? Yes, he does. No, he doesn't. Only possibilities, yes or no. Well, some people say maybe in some cases. But that's the reason why these questions are called yes, no questions. They are closed questions. And here we can notice the difference between these. And remember, in affirmatives, we have to add s or es to the verb if it is the third singular person. Here we don't. Remember, drop that rule, ignore it. It only applies for affirmatives. What if we have the verb to be? So how can we make questions with the verb to be? Yes, no questions in this case. Here we can identify where the question starts. So here, imagine that this is the question mark at the beginning and this is the question mark at the end. Are we from Cali? Yes, we are. No, we aren't. Is she the vice president? Yes, she is. No, she isn't. Only two possibilities, yes or no. Remember that the way in which we always answer yes, no questions is by using the same auxiliary that was used to make the question. So here, if the question uses the verb to be, which is are, is, or am, at the beginning of a question, then we should also use it for answering. Are we from Cali? Yes, we are. We cannot say yes, we do. No, don't misunderstand that. So what happened here in the construction of these questions? We swap the position of the verb and the subject. That's it. Now, how to make the information questions? As I mentioned a few moments ago, questions in English do not have the question mark at the beginning because we can easily identify where the question starts. In this case, we can identify with the question word, WH, and also the auxiliary because the auxiliary goes right after this question word. When we have this combination, we can absolutely be sure that that is a question. Why do we check our emails every day? Now, the answers here are not yes or no. The answer is actually a reason or an explanation or some particular information that has been asked in the question. For example here, why? The reasons why should be the answer. Where? A place. Information of a place. When? So information of a time or a date or a day of the week. A specific time. What time does he train every day? He trains at 5 a.m. Or you can just go straight to the information at 5 a.m. Alright, so here are a few other words that you can use as question words, like you can put any of these phrases or words here in this column, like to start a question. You can start a question with how many, how much, what time, how often, how old, which one, for how long, how, which, why, when, where, and what. As in the previous videos, there is a time for practice what you just learned, like to put into practice all those notes you wrote in your notebook, Word document, or like anywhere. If you didn't take notes, I think you should. It's just a recommendation. We don't have the memory of a computer, at least not yet. In the meantime, I suggest you to take notes wherever you want, but make sure you do, right? When you write down in a paper or in a notebook or whatever, something you just learned, your brain internalizes it better. So take notes. Here's the quiz of today. So the idea is to turn the following sentences into negatives or questions. If you need help, you can go back in the video and watch again the explanation. It doesn't matter if you decide to create a negative or a question, just do the exercise. And here is the second part of the activity. So feel free to stop the video here while you solve this exercise. Also, pause the video here because in the next slide we have the bonus of today. And that is the answers to the exercise that I left in the previous episode. If you haven't solved that exercise, my recommendation is you go check it out, solve it, come back here and continue watching this video for those answers. Here they come. So here are the answers to the exercise I left in the previous episode, alright? If you haven't done it, don't check this out, go there, do it yourself, and then come back here and compare. And guys, we reached the end of this episode and of the series Present Simple in a Nutshell. I know it was not really in a nutshell. I mean, this topic of present simple is probably one of the most difficult topics to understand and to master, especially if you are a beginner. So I hope most of the rules are clear, the structures and the exercise, and I hope all of that help you improve, okay? Remember that in the description you will find the information to join the classroom that I created on Duolingo with the specific exercises for you to practice what you have learned here. And you will also find the materials that I show in these presentations in the descriptions of each one of these videos. Remember, if you haven't checked those videos before watching this, my recommendation is to go check them out and solve the exercises there too. Thank you for watching until the end. I wanna send a special greeting to my students from Institución Educativa José María Carbonell here in Cali. God bless you all, and I see you in the next one. Thank you very much.